The crack of the flare gun echoed across the choppy gray water of the channel, a plume of angry red smoke hissing into the salt-laced wind. It was a sound designed to command attention, a punctuation mark of aggressive authority. Is this some kind of joke? The voice, sharp and condescending, cut through the air from the deck of the Coast Guard cutter. Petty Officer Martinez, young and puffed with the importance of his uniform, glared down at the small, aging vessel bobbing in his vessel's wake. "This is a restricted zone, old man. Didn't you see the markers?" James E. Williams, 82 years of age, did not turn his head. His hands, gnarled by time and toil, rested steadily on the helm of his boat, a lovingly restored vessel he called the Iron Coxswain. His gaze remained fixed on the distant silhouette of the naval base, his expression as calm and unreadable as the deep water beneath him. Another Coast Guardsman, younger and visibly nervous, shifted his weight. "He's not responding, Petty Officer." Martinez's jaw tightened. "I can see that." He keyed his vessel's loudspeaker. "This is the United States Coast Guard. Cut your engine and prepare to be boarded. Now." The command boomed across the waves, laced with an impatience that bordered on contempt. James slowly brought the throttle to neutral. The low rumble of his boat's engine died, leaving only the sound of the waves slapping against the hull and the impatient thrum of the cutter beside them. He still had not looked at them. He simply waited, a statue of quiet dignity carved from sea-worn teak and old memories. Petty Officer Martinez saw the stillness not as dignity but as defiance. He saw a decrepit old boat and a senile fisherman who was causing a problem on his watch. He signaled for his boarding team, his mind already running through the citation codes he would issue. This old man was about to learn a lesson about respecting authority. For Martinez, the day was just beginning to get interesting. He couldn't have known that for James Williams. It felt hauntingly familiar, just another tense moment on the water under a hostile gaze. The only difference was the flag on the other boat's mast. The thud of rubber-soled boots on the deck of the Iron Coxswain was jarringly loud in the sudden quiet. Petty Officer Martinez landed first, his posture radiating an aggressive energy that felt entirely out of place on the small, meticulously kept fishing boat. Two other Coast Guardsmen followed, fanning out with a practiced, almost theatrical efficiency. "All right, Grandpa, let's see some identification. And the vessel's registration," Martinez commanded, his voice dripping with condescension. He ran a critical eye over the boat. The paint was faded but not peeling, the brass fixtures were tarnished but free of corrosion, and the lines were coiled with a precision that spoke of decades of habit. He saw none of the care, only the age. "Does this thing even have a current registration, or did you just paddle it out of a museum?" James turned his head for the first time. His eyes, a pale but piercing blue, met Martinez's. They were eyes that had seen suns rise over foreign oceans and stared into darkness that few men could comprehend. They held no fear, no anger, only a profound weariness. He slowly reached into a small cubby near the helm and retrieved a weathered leather wallet and a plastic sleeve containing the boat's papers. He held them out. Martinez snatched them from his hand. He flipped open the wallet, his lips curling into a smirk as he saw the driver's license. "James E. Williams, 82 years old. You really shouldn't be out here by yourself, Pop. You could get confused, become a hazard." He handed the documents to one of his men. "Run this, and check the registration. I'll bet it expired during the Reagan administration." As the other guardsman relayed the information over his radio, Martinez continued his unsolicited inspection. He nudged an old tackle box with the toe of his boot. "What have you got in here?" "Contraband. Illegal catch." He didn't wait for an answer, instead flipping the lid open himself. Inside there was no contraband. There were only a few old rusted lures, a spool of heavy-duty line, and a small tarnished bronze star pinned to the felt lining of the lid. It was a simple, unadorned metal, its ribbon long since lost to time. Martinez poked it with his finger. "What's this?" "Find a prize in a cereal box." James said nothing. His gaze drifted past Martinez, toward the other boats that had begun to slow in the channel, their occupants drawn by the spectacle of a Coast Guard boarding. He could feel their eyes on him, a mixture of curiosity and pity. The humiliation was a quiet, creeping thing, like a cold tide rising. Martinez, emboldened by his small audience, raised his voice. "I asked you a question. This is a restricted zone. A major naval exercise is about to commence. You've ignored posted warnings and radio hails. You are interfering with military operations. That's a federal offense." "The channel is open," James said, his voice quiet but firm. It was the first full sentence he had spoken. "I checked the notices this morning. The restriction doesn't begin for another hour." "Oh, you're a maritime lawyer now, are you?" Martinez scoffed. "My orders are to secure this channel, and that's what I'm doing. Your outdated information doesn't matter. My direct orders do. The guardsman with the radio looked up, a flicker of uncertainty on his face. Petty officer? The registration is current, and the ID is valid. No flags. Martinez waved a dismissive hand, his face flushing with irritation. I don't care. His presence here is a violation of my direct orders to clear the lane. He's non-compliant. He turned back to James, his voice hardening into a genuine threat. You were given a lawful order to alter your course. You refused. I had to fire a warning flare. I have half a mind to seize this relic and arrest you for deliberate obstruction. He leaned in closer, invading the old man's personal space. So for the last time, tell me why you are here. Why are you ignoring a federal exclusion zone? Give me one good reason why I shouldn't haul you to shore in handcuffs. The humiliation was peaking. The crowd was growing. The accusations were baseless. James's hands, which had been so steady on the helm, tightened into fists at his side. He had been in this position before, on a river half a world away, surrounded by hostile forces, responsible for the men beside him. But this was different. This was his own country, his own waters, and the threat was not a foreign enemy, but a young man in a uniform he had once sworn to serve alongside. His silence was not defiance, but a dam holding back a flood of memories, a lifetime of violence and sacrifice that this boy could never understand. He had no words that would make sense to him. The Bronze Star. The young officer's mocking finger poking at the tarnished metal. As the taunt hung in the air, the gray, choppy waters of the channel dissolved, replaced for a heartbeat by the muddy, churning brown of the Mekong Delta. The air, thick with salt spray, became thick with gunpowder and the suffocating humidity of the jungle. It wasn't a memory, but a ghost, a flash of violent sensation, the rattle of a .50 caliber machine gun, its thunderous roar vibrating through the deck plates of a patrol boat, river, a PBR just like the restored hull he now stood upon. The frantic shouts of young men, their faces smeared with grease and fear, the brilliant, terrifying green of tracer rounds streaking through the twilight, stitching patterns of death across the water. He saw his own hands, young and powerful, gripping the twin triggers, firing back at an unseen enemy, hidden in the dense foliage of the riverbank. He felt the weight of the responsibility, the cold calculus of survival. The small bronze star wasn't a prize from a box. It was forged in that fire, a token for a night of impossible choices, a symbol of men who didn't come home. The flash was gone as quickly as it came, leaving James standing silently on his boat, the chill of the memory far colder than the ocean wind. Among the boats slowing to watch the confrontation was a sleek sailboat named the Wanderer. At its helm was a man named David Clark, a retired Navy captain who had spent 30 years navigating these same waters, both in uniform and out. He watched the scene unfold through his binoculars with a growing sense of unease. He saw the arrogance in the young petty officer's posture and the quiet, unnerving stillness of the old man. Then he saw the flare, a warning shot. Clark's blood ran cold. Firing a pyrotechnic warning at a small civilian vessel for a simple channel violation was a shocking, almost unthinkable escalation. It was a move for smugglers or hostiles, not for an old man in a fishing boat. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. He focused his binoculars on the old man. There was something in his stance, a familiar rigidity that Clark had seen before in combat veterans. It was the posture of a man who had been through hell and learned to simply endure the storm, knowing it would eventually pass. He lowered his glasses to the boat itself, the iron coxswain. It wasn't just any old fishing boat. Clark's trained eye recognized the distinctive lines. It was a heavily modified PBR Mark II, a river patrol boat, a Vietnam relic, a warrior's vessel. This is wrong, he muttered to himself. His wife, sitting in the cockpit, looked at him with concern. David, what is it? That Coast Guard kid is out of his depth, Clark said, already moving toward his ship-to-shore radio. He's about to make the biggest mistake of his career. He bypassed the standard channels. He had been the commander of the nearby naval base a decade ago. He still had the direct number to the base operations center memorized. He punched it in, his fingers moving with a sudden urgency. A crisp, professional voice answered. Naval Base Operations. This is Captain David Clark. Retired, he said, his voice steady and authoritative. I'm in the main channel, Grid 7B. I am witnessing a U.S. Coast Guard boarding of a civilian vessel that has escalated unnecessarily. They've fired a warning shot. A warning shot, sir? We have no reports of— Listen to me, Clark cut in. The vessel is a converted PBR named the Iron Coxswain. The man they are harassing is an elderly gentleman. They are accusing him of violating the exercise exclusion zone. I need you to run the name of the boat's owner. They've got his ID. His name is James E. Williams. He spelled it out, WILLIAMS. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the sound of typing. Clark held his breath, staring across the water at the small boat where the old man stood, surrounded, his dignity being stripped away piece by piece. He just hoped someone in that operations center was old enough to know the name. He hoped the Navy hadn't forgotten its legends. Inside the climate-controlled quiet of the Naval Base Operations Center, Lieutenant Commander Evans took the call. His initial expression was one of mild annoyance. A retired captain calling in a complaint about the Coast Guard was not unusual, but it was a jurisdictional headache. He dutifully typed the name into the Shared Services database, Williams James E. He expected to see a list of fishing licenses and maybe a parking violation. Instead, the screen blinked and repopulated with a data file so heavily flagged it glowed red. Access was restricted. A prompt appeared. Level 5 clearance required. Note I base commander immediately. Evans stared at the screen. He had never seen a flag that high on a civilian file. He quickly typed in his credentials to override for more information. The first line of text that appeared made the breath catch in his throat. Recipient, Medal of Honor. His blood turned to ice. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair over. "Get the Admiral," he yelled, his voice cracking with an urgency that silenced the entire room. "Get him on the phone right now." Operators scrambled, their procedural calm shattered. The base admiral, a stern no-nonsense aviator named Harris, was patched through in seconds. "What is it, Evans?" "Sir," Evans stammered, reading from the screen, his voice trembling slightly. "We have a situation in the channel. The Coast Guard has intercepted a civilian vessel. Sir, the owner is James E. Williams." There was a moment of profound silence on the line. The name hung in the air, thick with history. Admiral Harris knew it instantly. Every naval officer knew it. It was a name spoken with reverence in the halls of Annapolis and in the mess decks of carriers. A legend. "Are you certain?" The Admiral's voice was low, dangerous. "Confirmed, sir. He's on his boat, the Iron Coxswain. The Coast Guard has him at gunpoint. The witness, Captain Clark, reports they fired a warning shot. A string of curses, sharp and venomous, erupted from the Admiral's end of the line. "Those cowboys." The command came, hard as iron. "Recall the exercise. Now, scramble the escort fleet. I want every ship in Strike Group 7 turned around. Get me the commander of the USS Arleigh Burke on a command channel. Their new mission is to render honors. And get me a helicopter. I'm going out there myself. Move. Back on the water." Petty Officer Martinez was ignorant of the storm he had unleashed. All he knew was that he had the old man cornered. James Williams had refused to answer his questions, offering only what Martinez perceived as defiant silence. His patience was gone. This was no longer about a channel violation, it was about asserting his authority. "That's it. I'm done playing games," Martinez declared, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click echoed in the tense air. "You're stubborn, you're non-compliant, and you're a danger to navigation. I'm placing you under arrest. We're seizing this piece of junk, and you're coming with us. We'll let the doctors on shore figure out if you're competent to be operating a vessel." He reached out and grabbed James's arm. The touch was rough, intended to intimidate. It was the final, irreversible overreach. He was putting his hands on a man who had commanded boats under enemy fire, a man who had faced down death itself. He was treating a hero like a common criminal, and he was doing it in full view of a growing audience. In his mind, he was cementing his control. In reality, he was sealing his fate. James did not struggle. He simply stood there, his arm in the young officer's grasp, his pale blue eyes finally lifting to look over Martinez's shoulder toward the horizon. It began as a vibration, a low-frequency hum that seemed to resonate not in the ears but in the chest cavity. It was a feeling more than a sound, the thrum of immense power moving through the water. Martinez paused, handcuffs still in hand, a flicker of confusion on his face. The sound grew, deepening into an unmistakable chorus of massive turbine engines. Then, they appeared. Breaking through the morning haze on the horizon was not a single ship but a fleet. In the lead, a gray behemoth, its sleek angular hull cutting through the waves with predatory grace, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. Flanking it were a Ticonderoga-class cruiser and 2 frigates. And behind them all, so vast it seemed to block out the sky, was the awe-inspiring silhouette of a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, its flight deck lined with fighter jets. The entire naval strike group, which had been heading out for a major exercise, had turned around, and they were all heading directly for this single spot in the channel. A roar tore through the sky. A flight of 4 FA-18 Super Hornets, in a perfect diamond formation, screamed overhead at low altitude. They weren't on a combat vector, they were on a ceremonial flypast. They tipped their wings in a crisp salute as they passed directly over the small weathered deck of the iron coxswain. The flyby was so low, so loud that it shook the very air, rattling the fittings on the Coast Guard cutter and sending waves of concussion across the water. Martinez and his men stumbled back, hands instinctively going to their ears, their faces pale with shock and disbelief. This wasn't an exercise. This was something else entirely. This was for him. The lead destroyer, the USS Arleigh Burke, did not slow until its massive bow was looming over the tiny Coast Guard cutter, casting it in a colossal shadow. The sheer scale was terrifying. The cutter was a child's toy next to this steel giant of the sea. Along the entire length of the destroyer's rail from bow to stern stood hundreds of sailors. They were not in their working fatigues, but in their immaculate dress white uniforms, standing shoulder to shoulder at perfect parade rest. It was a gesture of supreme honor, a ceremony known as manning the rails. A single deafening blast from the destroyer's horn echoed across the water, not a warning but a formal salute. Then a voice, amplified by the ship's powerful public address system, boomed with a clarity that cut through the engine noise and the wind. It was the voice of the ship's captain, Boatswain's Mate First Class James Elliott Williams, the voice declared, the sound washing over the stunned crowd of onlookers. It did not address the Coast Guard. It did not address anyone else. It addressed only the old man on the fishing boat. The United States Navy is honored to be in your presence. We are here to escort you. Petty Officer Martinez froze, the handcuffs falling from his numb fingers and clattering to the deck. His face had gone from red with anger to sheet white with a dawning, sickening horror. The name, James E. Williams. It meant nothing to him, but it clearly meant everything to the United States Navy. The captain's voice continued, and now he was reciting something from a script, his tone filled with reverence. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. On October 31, 1966, Boatswain's Mate First Class Williams, serving as patrol commander for a two-boat river patrol, was leading his patrol against a concentration of Viet Cong guerrillas. The story of that day unfolded over the water, a tale of heroism so profound it bordered on the unbelievable. The captain spoke of how Williams's patrol was ambushed by two enemy sampans. After sinking them, he led his boats into a narrow canal to pursue the fleeing enemy, only to find himself in a hornet's nest. He was facing dozens of heavily armed sampans and junks, supported by shore-based artillery. For 3 solid hours under continuous savage enemy fire, James Williams had fought. He directed his men, coordinated with helicopter gunships he called for support, and personally manned his boat's machine guns. He repeatedly exposed himself to withering fire to rescue the wounded and direct the battle. By the time it was over, his 2 small patrol boats had accounted for the destruction of 65 enemy vessels and disrupted a major enemy logistical operation. As the citation concluded, Boatswain's Mate First Class Williams's extraordinary heroism and consummate fighting skill were in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. A profound silence fell over the channel. The sailors on the destroyer's rail, hundreds of them, raised their hands in a single sharp salute. On the other boats, phones that had been recording the humiliation were now recording the vindication. The expressions of the onlookers had changed from pity to absolute awe. They were in the presence of a legend, and a young, arrogant petty officer had just tried to put him in handcuffs. A black, rigid-hulled inflatable boat detached from the side of the destroyer and sliced across the water, carrying 2 men, the destroyer's captain and a command master chief whose chest was a billboard of service ribbons. The RHIB pulled alongside the iron coxswain, and the 2 men came aboard, their movements crisp and respectful. They ignored the Coast Guardsmen completely. The captain, a man with eagles on his collar, faced James Williams and rendered a slow, perfect salute. "Sir," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "it is an honor." James, for the first time, let a small, weary smile touch his lips. He gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. Only then did the captain turn his gaze to Petty Officer Martinez. The look in his eyes was not loud or angry. It was something far worse. It was a cold, surgical disdain. "Petty Officer," the captain said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of his rank and the entire fleet behind him. "You and your men will return to your cutter. You will return to your station. You will file a full report of this incident, and you will await my call. You have brought shame upon your uniform and dishonored the service of a national hero. The difference between authority and arrogance is a lesson you are about to learn in the most comprehensive way imaginable." Martinez could only stammer, "Sir, I didn't know." "That is the entire point," the captain cut him off. "You are not paid to know, you are paid to respect." As the shamed Coast Guardsmen retreated to their boat, James Williams finally spoke. He looked not at the captain but at the pale, trembling Martinez. His voice was not accusatory. It was gentle, like a grandfather teaching a difficult lesson. "Son," he said, "that uniform doesn't make you a man. Your actions do. The salutes, the medals, they're just markers. The real weight is what you do when no one is watching. Remember that." As James spoke of the weight of one's actions, the scene flickered again. Not to the chaos of battle, but to the quiet, lonely aftermath. A young James Williams, barely out of his teens, sits on the edge of a cot in a sweltering hooch back at base. The sounds of celebration and relief are distant, muffled. He is alone, methodically field-stripping his .50 caliber machine gun, his hands moving with an autonomous precision. His face is not triumphant. It is etched with the profound exhaustion and sorrow of a survivor, the heavy knowledge of the cost of the fight. The bronze star he would later receive, now pinned in his tackle box, was just a piece of metal. The true lasting emblem of that day was the silent weight he carried in his memory. The fallout from the incident was swift and decisive. The official report from the destroyer's captain, combined with the admiral's personal involvement and dozens of cell phone videos from outraged civilian boaters, created a firestorm within the Coast Guard's district command. Petty Officer Martinez and his crew were immediately reassigned to shore duty pending a full investigation. The institutional response was significant. The Coast Guard issued a formal public apology to James E. Williams, which he quietly accepted. More importantly, they mandated a new training program for all personnel developed in partnership with the Navy. It was a course on military history, inter-service respect, and specifically the proper identification and courteous treatment of veterans. It became known colloquially as the Williams Protocol. Months passed. The seasons began to change. One cool autumn afternoon, a young man in civilian clothes walked into a small, dusty bait and tackle shop on the waterfront. He was looking for a specific type of fishing line when he saw an old man at the counter, paying for a small bag of shrimp. It was James Williams. The young man, a former petty officer named Martinez, felt a knot of shame and anxiety tighten in his stomach. He had been through a disciplinary review, spent weeks in remedial training, and replayed his arrogant actions 1,000 times in his mind. He hesitated, then took a breath and walked over. He stood a respectful distance away until James had finished his purchase. "Sir," Martinez said, his voice quiet, stripped of all its former bravado. James turned, his pale blue eyes regarding him without malice. He recognized him instantly. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," Martinez stammered, his eyes fixed on the floor, "for my conduct. There's no excuse. I was wrong." James Williams looked at the young man for a long moment. He saw not the arrogant officer from that day, but a humbled man who had learned a painful lesson. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was not a gesture of effusive forgiveness, but one of simple, quiet acknowledgement. The matter was closed. He picked up his bag of bait. "The tide's turning," James said, his voice calm and even. "Should be good fishing this evening." He walked out of the shop, leaving Martinez standing by the counter, feeling the immense weight of a simple, graceful act of closure. The story of James Williams reminds us that heroes walk among us, often in the quietest of forms. Their valor is not always on display, but it is a legacy that commands our deepest respect. If you were moved by this story of honor and vindication, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Veteran Valor for more stories of the brave.